to remember our own experiences. So we're gonna start. We're gonna ask you to all be involved in that, but we're gonna start by asking a few people to sort of share a story about their journey, their ceremony, something related to their own ordination or deployment, as a way of inspiring the rest of us. So who better to inspire than Rabbi Mark Novak?
I just remember, Mark, when your document was burning up before your eyes.
Yeah, thank you. There's too many in-jokes that I'm not going to share any of them. Hi everyone, I'm Mark Novak, and I'm not only a rabbi, but I'm a cantor, so my wife likes to call me a ranter, which is true most of the time. I met, you know, probably like all of us in this room, I had moments where the angel and I intersected, like when Yosef goes out looking for his brothers. I met a woman named Dee Herman, who many of you know, and Dee said that she had just gotten back from DLTI, and something that I might want to check out. And so I was very, very suspicious of this world, as I had actually encountered Reb Zalman in the late 1980s, having gone to B'nai Or, and ran out screaming, well, actually ran out, because there was nothing there that resonated with me as being Jewish that went on that Shabbat morning. In hindsight, Phyllis was there and Art Waskow was there, but they were rolling around on the floor doing things that, and there wasn't any Matbea, not even know what the word Matbea meant at the time. And so when she said Jewish renewal, all that I could think of was, oh, those crazy people who were meeting at Germantown Jewish Center that time that I went to check it out. But then little did I know, enter Sean Zevet. Thank you, Sean, that was very, very good cue. Of course, so like other people, perhaps, you know, I tasted the juice at DLTI, and the rest was history. But my road to Smicha actually goes back a few years earlier and intersects with Rabbi Art Green, who's here this week. In that I applied to and was accepted to RRC in the early 90s. And I remember, and Leila Galverner reminds me that she was on the committee that interviewed me to become a student there. And after I left the interview, they all agreed that I would make a wonderful student, but I probably wouldn't last out through the program, because I was looking more for God than looking for an education, right? So jump ahead many, many years, and it's my first Ohalah at the Boulderado, which I remember lovingly and wish we were still there in many, many ways. Sitting with Reb Daniel for the first time after I had been accepted into the program, and say, I need to confess something. I'm not really interested that much in being a rabbi. I'm much more interested in studying. And what Reb Daniel said to me was that, well, you are exactly the kind of student that we're looking for. So at that time, I felt very, very much at home, and went through, of course, I'm going through some things in the slideshow that might be interesting. One is finding out how to spell my name correctly. My name is Moshe Be'er. I always thought Be'er was Beit Aleph Resh, like a well, but online, my first Ohalah was standing with David Schneier, and talking about the spelling of my name, and Reb Zalman's right in front of us, and he says, Zalman, tell him that Be'er is with an ayin, and it's not with an aleph. And Reb Zalman says, guys, good to hate, let him believe anything he wants to believe. So that was my first encounter with Reb Zalman. And then when I got Smicha, that's exactly what I talked about. I talked about Moshe Be'er because it was Parshat Shemot, and the fact that there's a fire in me, and that's the way that I had come to understand not only my own neshama, but my own path and my own journey, and how I've been led to this amazing chevra of which we all are a part. Just one or two other things. As far as formation of rabbi, where I became rabbi, I think there's two things I want to point to. Number one is in CPE. doing clinical pastoral education is where I think I finally saw the outline, you know, of rabbi taking shape, where I was given an immense amount of responsibility in the group I was in, and I just walked right into it as an elder in this group, and it was with great honor and great. It was a moment. Oh my gosh, this is, I can connect now the texts. I'm walking the path. You know, it was more than all the studying began to take on a little bit more form and shape, which was very meaningful. And another thing was when your Skype rings and it's Reb Zalman at the other end, Alav Shalom, asking you to do something with him, to lead a Shabbaton, there is an understanding that, okay, now I, to quote my beloved Rachel Berenblatt, you know, now I really am going out to play with the other rabbis. You know, my first Ohalah, looking up at all the people getting smicha, and I'm almost done, I'm thinking, oh my God, how am I ever going to stand up there with all those people? It seemed like Sinai was so far away, and Reb Zalman was on the very top of the mountain, and there's all these other people standing around, and I'm never going to be able to. And even if they want to give me smicha, I'm never going to accept it because I'm unworthy, You know, but then I finally got to that point of, okay, yes, I am unworthy. I'm a man of Aral Sfatayim, you know, and I'm always going to be that way. But I have a place on that mountain that's equally as important as everybody else. And without me, you're not as full. And without you, I'm not as full. And then together, we make for one darn good rabbi. So that's a little part of my journey. Thank you.
Now, you had a gentleman earlier. You had an iPad and said he was going to be recording some of this today.
Thank you, Mark.
Yes.
So, we're so blessed that this year, with our theme being deep ecumenism, that we have some amazing guests with us. One of my, you know, when people ask me, so who's your closest rabbinic colleague where I live, and I always say, well, that would be Pastor Steve, you know, because we've been working together for 25 years, and so Steve was here last year, and I hope I don't violate confidence, but after, and I said, checked in with him at the beginning of the conference, and I said last year, and I said, listen, I got a lot of responsibilities at the conference, so I'm not going to be able to, you know, hang out so much with you, but I'm going to introduce you to some pretty cool people, and then have at it. And he did it. He met a lot of you, and at the end of the conference, you know, I checked in with him, and I said, so how was it? He said, best clergy conference I've ever been to. I said, yeah. So some of the other folks who are my closest colleagues where I live are brothers at a Franciscan retreat center called San Damiano. Amazing group of folks. They have retreats. I don't know, they must have 5 retreats a week, almost every week of the year. I mean, they are just full to bursting on every topic related to spirituality that you could imagine. And they're just sweet, loving people. And when we were trying to figure out how to deal with refugee resettlement, the brothers said, we have 85 rooms, we'll make 5 rooms available for refugees. And it enabled us to really start doing refugee resettlement work in an area where people, you know, it's very expensive, and you wouldn't normally think you'd resettle refugees in a place where rents are off the chart. But the brothers stepped up, as they always do. So we, in honor of our deep ecumenism, in this moment of talking about smicha, we thought we would invite Brother Al, another wonderful Franciscan brother, to come and share his story. Brother Al. A little love for Brother Al, come on.
Well, thank you so much, and I'm so happy to be here. This is my second Ohalah, and God willing, there'll be more. But standing before you and sharing this story with you reminds me of the prophet Isaiah, who, at least in one translation, said we have to widen the stakes of our tent. And so I think we're getting pretty wide right now. Well, I'm from New York. I was born in the Bronx, and I was made a Roman Catholic as an infant. And in New York, which is very ethnic, I basically knew people of two faith traditions. People who are Catholic and people who are Jewish. And so we celebrated each other's holidays, we became very good friends, we ate at each other's houses, and I grew up with that. I come from a long line of Shabbos Goyim from the Grand Concourse in the Bronx. However, my journey of faith when I joined the Franciscan Friars in 1982 brought me to the Midwest. And so suddenly I'm in Chicago, and I'm in Detroit, and I'm in Galveston, Texas, and I'm in Cincinnati, Ohio. And what happened while I was studying to become a Franciscan, and it does take a number of years, right before I was about to make my solemn profession, and the solemn profession is when you say, I'm in this for life, I took some time off. And it was during that time off, while I was living in Chicago and becoming familiar with the Midwest, is when I was introduced to Reformed Christianity. It was new to me. And I was looking for an individual whose reputation preceded her. And she happened to be a member of a very small congregational United Church of Christ parish. And I went there with the intention of meeting her and learning from her. And that was the first Sunday of Advent, 1991. My last service there was Sunday, the 16th of September, 2001. I never left that church. So I was formed for the Roman Catholic priesthood, graduated from Roman Catholic Seminary, and then said, well, now I'm discovering this whole other part of the vineyard. Went to Reformed Seminary, went to another seminary just in case, and was ordained in 1993 in a Reformed seminary, and in a rather ecumenical service. So there were people from a variety of different faith traditions there as part of my smicha, including Roman Catholics. And I was pastor of this church, filled with wonderful people, for many, many years, until it came time for me to return to the Friars. Being Catholic, I think, is maybe a little bit like being Jewish. It's in your DNA. And I missed being a friar. I didn't want to go to my grave apart from the church of my origin. The Reformed Christians, the Protestants, have been very kind to me and very gracious, but I missed home. So I was part of the renewal of that parish. I thought, my job here is done. And I called Cincinnati, which is where our headquarters for our province is located, and I said, I think I want to come back. And they said, come on back. And the Franciscans welcomed me back 15 years ago. And I did finally make solemn profession, so I'm now in it for life. I've got my 3 knots here representing my vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience. But there was a price to be paid for what I did. For while the Franciscans themselves just thought that my journey, which Thomas Merton once said, God writes straight with crooked lines, thought that my journey through ecumenism enriched my life as a Franciscan friar. At that level, the Vatican didn't quite get it. They kind of took offense. So there were penalties to be paid for that. And there will be ongoing penalties. Ordination, smicha, is an unrepeatable sacrament. Once you've received holy orders, that's it. You've done it, you can't do it again. And so I came back, I was welcomed back, I'm very happy to be back. My ecumenical journey, I think, has prepared me very well for the work that I'm doing with Chazan Steve in our Song and Spirit Institute for Peace, and my passion for religions in general and faith traditions in general continues to grow. And I think, notwithstanding some hand slapping from Rome, I wouldn't have done it another way. Thank you.
So every good piece of Torah deserves its midrash, and Sue Morningstar has a brief midrashic commentary on Brother Al's journey.
I just wanted to talk about my own smicha in 2009, which was very ecumenical. It was at the Boldorado, and I think Son Ora and some other people who were ordained with me will remember that Richie Havens was performing across the street, and he was there, and Reb Zalman decided to ordain him as a Rodef Shalom, and Reb Sean got to sing Freedom with him at the smicha ceremony. So that, I think, was the most ecumenical smicha ceremony I can remember, and it was so powerful, just a really powerful moment. That's all I had to share.
Ed Stathman had a brief story. Come on up. As was I. In fact, we walked into the bar at the Boldorado that night, and Richie Havens was sitting there, and three of us walked in, and there was nobody else in the bar. It was late. We walked up to him and we said, "Look, if you want to eat in peace, we fully understand. We don't want to bother you, but we just wanted to say we're fans." He said, "Sit down." 3 hours later, at 2:30 in the morning, he said, and he talked, not all he said was, "No, whoa." That was it. That was it. Otherwise, he just held the stage and talked about, making a film with Bob Dylan and his amazing music career, and it was like we went to bed and we went, "Where are we? This is great, only at Ohalah." So, Ed.
3 rabbis walk into a bar.
So this is a little tale of my deployment. It was perhaps 6 months before my smicha ceremony, which at that time was in 2009 here. And I had finished all of my studies, but because the smicha ceremony was in January, I was kind of had a light last semester. And I was already thinking about what would I do when I get smicha. So on the Ohalah listserv was an ad or a posting that said, "Outside Magazine says that Bozeman, Montana is the #1 place to live in the United States, and we are looking for a rabbi. And here's the application process, but if you have any questions, you might call so-and-so and ask." So I had 2 questions. The first question was, would they consider a student rabbi for 6 months, who would then be ordained? And the second question I asked because I'm intermarried. And when I first started the Olive Rabbinic program, Reb Marsha had cautioned me that it's very likely no congregation would hire me. And knowing that, I wanted to say that up front and not waste their time and mind if that was going to be a disqualifying sort of element of the process. So I called up the person and I asked about the student rabbi for 6 months thing, and he said, "Oh, that's not a problem." And I said, "What about this? I'm intermarried. Is that going to be a problem?" And he said, "Well, our committee hadn't really talked about that. We weren't expecting that, but let me get up with them and I'll get back with you." And I heard back a few days later, and he said, "No, that's not a problem. Go ahead and apply." So I went ahead and applied and ultimately found myself in Bozeman, Montana, as the Bozemaner. And about a year later, I was speaking to somebody in the committee. And I said, "Hey, whatever happened with that discussion about that I was intermarried, and what was the conversation like, and what were people saying?" And he said, we were concerned about that. I said, how so? He said, well, we had an application process and we thought you were trying to jump it by telling us that you're intermarried, because so many of us are intermarried, that we thought you'd be saying you'd relate to us much better, and that should have come out in the application process rather than sort of giving yourself an up in the process over the other candidates. And so I thought, given the theme of this conference, of deep ecumenicism, that might be an interesting deployment story to share.
Reminds me that when I started at the Chaim 23 years ago, I also told him that I was intermarried. I said my wife is Israeli and she has no intention of being the Rebbitzin. So I said, ooh. Still true, will not be the Rebbitzin. So, Sean, will you come regale us with a little tale of Swivl?
Regale you. Regale you. Hand in your assignments on time. Do your sit-ups without regaling people. I don't know. I'd love to share something there. So picking up on a couple of threads that revealed themselves. First of all, I was just sharing with Aura the Richie Havens moment. And thank you, Sue, for reminding that. So we actually couldn't find him. And so we had put the certificate together. We were buying time. David Zaslow and I were kind of sending eye signals. And finally he said, just go for it. So I started singing Freedom. And halfway through I heard a harmony. And I looked over and he had taken the stage, next to me. And I froze for a moment, and keep going, I never get to sing the harmony. So I just kept on going, and so that's how that song unfolded. It was really quite a precious moment. And Brother Al, to walk into this space soon after you, having had the bracha of a year of back and forth in Detroit and being able to daven with you and Chazan Steve together, it's very special. And I too, deep ecumenism is an idea, but how we live it out in relationship is how we embody it. And my years as an actor and director, when I left the commercial world and went to the streets in honor of St. Francis's 800th anniversary, we actually, the theater company I was with, did a play about his life, and I was Francis for 2 years in that production, along with doing the Gospels. I was Thomas Merton's friend, Robert Lax, in a play on him. So much of my time was spent Shabbos morning in shuls and in kneeling in churches and taking the place of the minister's sermon with the play on that ilk for a good decade before I went to rabbinical school. So it's it's a bracha, and your chuz are really amazing. So the piece that resonates, and I really appreciate the invitation too, because it's it's almost like this bittersweetness to recall some of this. When I was 23, doing all those plays, and particularly my time getting to share Francis's life, propelled me to look at rabbinical school seriously for the first time when I was 23, and all I knew was JTS. Right? So I got as far as getting applications, but ultimately stayed where I was and felt that was the work. I was a bit too scared, and I also was committed to the work I was doing. So when the circle came around again, and having started a chavurah in Toronto, an egalitarian chavurah, left a 2,000 household conservative synagogue as a member there to begin that, and Shalom Schachter and Marcy Gilbert were two of the members that soon joined us after the beginning of that endeavor. And I went to a cousin's wedding in Atlanta and went to the MLK Center and saw this book by Howard Thurman that I leafed through, and it so spoke to me that I brought it home, and it inspired the first liturgical piece that I ever wrote. Open unto me light for my darkness. So Shalom's father was visiting one Pesach, and that's how I met him. He's always Shalom's father to me. And I started singing this at services, and suddenly I see this older man like running back and forth, like just crying, and afterwards, as soon as the service was done, he ran up to me with his eyes blazing, going, that was my black Rebbe, that was my black Rebbe, where did you find that? We must sing this song together, and just on and on. And so that began that relationship, meeting as people that way. So I'll jump to the smicha piece, which is also the point of this. So I knew that I felt a deep connection with Reb Zalman, and to get to know him as a person amidst the complex family system that he was part of, and that struggles as well. It was a different type of Kabbalah. It was a Kabbalah of relationship and striving to continue to be and become in life. And when I applied to RC, for me it was a both and that way, because many of my friends had gone to RC, and that whole community was a place that felt very compelling. So when I left Toronto to begin that, I was, before the Aleph program got established, I was one of the last, I guess, double trackers. So for the journey at RC was very much its own integrity for me, and it was my Aleph program at the same time. So when I came to the end and I've got my ordination from RC, it was a bit of an envelope pushing smicha there, which that word is even being used now at times. It's no longer forbidden to name that which shall not be named. Smicha is no longer Voldemort at RC. We can actually use the term. And I invited David Teutsch, who was the president of RC, and Reb Marsha, and my 90-year-old grandfather, and my wife and stepson at the time were my circle giving me the blessing. And that powerful moment, of people were saying, how did you get both of them in the circle at the same time? Like, there's all these tensions and these two worlds. I said, well, I actually went up to them and said, would you offer me a blessing in the circle? That's how complicated that was. And so just to live in that world. And so the question was what I was going to do for my smicha with Reb Zalman, who wanted to offer it to me at that time. And I said, I'd really like to take a year. I'd like the smicha that I'm gifted from you and from your lineage to be something that has some airtime, not right at the same time. And DLTI, forming that with Marsha, was my project for Reb Zalman in that regard. And that began in 1999, 2000. So the day of the smicha, it wasn't the grand pomp and circumstance of today. It was 10 people in a yurt at the old Eilat Chaim, some of whom are here. Reb Marsha couldn't even be there because she was occupied elsewhere or whatever, so I got her signature later. And I remember preparing for the day, and I was dressed all in white and had a white kippah and was trying to be in my Tahora-ness, as much as possible, just whatever was going on, how I felt I should be to receive, this smicha. And I was sitting outside before going into the yurt, and suddenly I feel a slap on my leg, and it's, it's Zalman, and he sits down next to me, and he says, so Nu, why do you want smicha from me? And that was my reaction. I froze. I didn't know what to say. I felt, not worthy on some level. All I kept on thinking were the egoic reasons. I kind of went into a very undeserving place inside myself. And the longer it took for me to figure out something, the worse I felt about not being able to quickly say, well, Zalman, because of the blah, 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 and all these wise or heart-centered things. And I started crying because I wasn't sure what was going to happen. And, he wiped away a tear and he said, Yotzer or v'orei choshech, oseh shalom v'orei tara, anochi yud hevav hesher v'orei takol. The light and the dark serves the one. Let's take them both and give you smicha. And so we walked into that yurt, and I felt so seen, for that I was experiencing my own shadow, and that he could see that then too, and say, you don't need to come up with some smart response. Be in your not knowingness, and be in the strugglingness. Let's take it there. So in the actual smicha, I need to find that tape recording somewhere, because I guess he assumed because I was from Winnipeg in Canada that he could offer all these. He started talking about all these things from Winnipeg. He went into 5 minutes of French, which I have no clue what he was talking about at the time. Just all this stuff. And I felt, I was also giving him an opportunity to claim a missing piece of his, of that time, and that he was actually, sometimes he would be he would step in when the rabbi was away at the synagogue with my family, was a member, but I never met him there, at that time, even though I was a child at the same synagogue that he served on occasion. So we never crossed paths in Winnipeg. So that piece where I felt actually that in receiving smicha from him and the other beloveds that were in the room was a way of also receiving him. I feel I didn't just get smicha from Zalman, I got to be part of receiving the piece in him that wanted to be spoken at that moment in time, even in languages I couldn't quite understand. So we co-arise with each other, and for me that's one of the greatest gifts of that time. And then he insisted on signing my RC document with a magic marker that was bigger and blacker than all the other signatures, which I didn't even say, do you want to sign this? He saw the document on the table and took it upon himself to do. So I thought, okay, that's also receiving part of the tikkun. I hope no one looks too closely at that signature. Okay. Anyways, thank you for the time.
So we had actually thought that we weren't going to get enough people to tell stories, and we know that our Chaver is really we're really so parsimonious with our words. So we thought originally that we would take time now and have people tell smicha stories around the table, but we want to be respectful of the smicha ceremony. We don't want to be late. So what we're going to ask is. Part of our ways of connecting, and one of the great gifts of this gathering is not just the incredible soul place of reconnecting with people we love, but finding new people to love. And the way we do that is by telling our stories. So we want to really encourage all of you. We want to hang out with the people we know, and it's a beautiful thing. But at a meal, if somebody around the table is not somebody you know, share a story, and it might be a smicha story, or it might be another story of meaning. Because when we share our truths, when we share our stories of meaning, doors open, the bridges are created. And that person who you don't know today, some of the people, I look around the room and I think, I remember meeting for the first time here, and now they're beloveds. So it's the gift of this place, and so we encourage you to take advantage of that over the next several days.
I think that we, without distorting the time at all, could take a few moments and perhaps just introduce yourself to the person next to you, even if you already think you know who they are, and you think they know who you are. And tell them a little bit about yourself. And if you feel, out of your own experience, that you have an abyssal Torah to tell about some deployment of your own, whether it's a smicha or some other sense of call or of being propelled in a direction, to just in duos, take a few minutes and do that, and then we'll reconvene for just a few moments at the end, and then proceed to the smicha ceremony. So whether you believe you do or don't know the person next to you, have a short conversation about deployment.
got the money. They're okay, they're weird, but they're okay to get them. And after the weekend, this kind of, and I was sure it was because that thing is and then I gave to my friend Siberia. Program and nothing means anything. But like, oh, somebody was like,